is an 8-iron, and it's a dead shank.
Wow.
Way right.
Oh,
Takes a hop
shank.
off the paddle.
You got to be kidding me. Very tough pitch shot right here. You got to hit it into the hill. One hop up and bite, and it's in.
Kind of like that.
Well, I would like to welcome a man of many talents, professional golfer, journalist extraordinaire, we'll call him. There's a lot going on with golf in Mark Baldwin's life, so we're very excited to have him on the Sub 70 podcast. Pro, thanks for taking the time today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Jason. It's great to speak with you today.
Well, before we jump into your career and everything that's going on, there's some stuff to talk about in the world of golf, and this will probably be out tomorrow. So we're talking about Thursday's rounds at the U.S. Open. But I'm going to have you put your golf analyst hat on. A couple 62s in a major championship, pretty incredible. I wouldn't say the golf course playing easy, but there's scoring opportunities, a lot more lower scores than we're used to seeing in the U.S. Open. What's sort of your take from round one? And then just maybe as a golf fan, what do you think about a softer, a little easier going U.S. Open versus how the USGA normally does it?
I think that yesterday was fun to watch, what little I did watch, but I know there was a strong reaction on social media, and I know that most people would prefer to see the battle strongly against par at the top of the leaderboard. But as was pointed out by a friend who was there yesterday, the conditions were just absolutely perfect. And I think it was maybe difficult to anticipate how ideal those scoring conditions were. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of course correction the USGA takes today, last night and this morning, and what the scores look like today. But I'm not sure exactly how many players broke par yesterday. I think it was, around 30 or so, but maybe a little more. But then, I think it was the first time in the history of round one or two of the U.S. Open that nobody has shot in the 80s. So there will definitely be a course correction. I kind of thought it was a fun opening round. As a player, I think, that eases you into the U.S. Open a little bit. I don't know that is that's not exactly the culture of the U.S. Open. That's not what we're used to seeing, but there definitely will be a correction, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's pretty significant this weekend.
As a fan, I don't mind watching the best in the world make some birdies. I don't know if I subscribe. I mean, yes, there's something, Tom Kite winning in 92 under brutal conditions and everyone's shooting 80, but I kind of like watching the best players in the world, if they're on, shooting a score. And there was some, not so great scores too, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I'm changing my mind on the U.S. Open a little bit, but we certainly don't want goofy where, they lost that green years ago where Phil's hitting putts just to protest it because of, the pin position was deplorable. I'm kind of fine if Fowler's on that day and there's some scores out there. Let them shoot a score a little bit, and they'll toughen it up as the week goes on. But
right.
I don't know. I kind of like seeing it yesterday of like this real cool, iconic golf course and letting. Well, you guys are that good, right? When you're on, you're on, and if the greens were holding, which they were, and there seems to be a little bit more room off the tee on that golf course, you guys are going to go low. It's just you guys play at that level.
Well, that's very nice of you to say you guys, but I know you're talking about the top players in the world, and I think if Ricky Fowler, it'd be interesting if it was a different player who was at the very top of the board. Like if Eric Cole had a shot 62 yesterday, would we be having the same conversation? It's kind of joyful to watch Ricky come back and after what he's been through in the last couple of years and be at the top of the board and create all sorts of possibilities. But as so many writers and observers on the ground pointed out, the fairways are larger than typical U.S. Open fairways, and because they're patchy, they're supposed to bound in different directions and be more difficult to, basically reduce the size of them. But it wasn't really the case yesterday, and that's largely why you didn't see a whole bunch of bounding shots into greens. Even shots from the rough, it wasn't like you had to, you really had to, like reasonable odds, you had to land them 40 yards short of the green or whatever. So yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting U.S. Open, but I thought it was a fun opening round, and guys may not make much more progress against par if they really overcorrect.
Have you played LACC before?
I did. I played it in college. We played it prior to competing in USC's event one year, and it was just an absolute blast. It was one of my favorite golf courses we played in college.
It looks like Gil Hanse, nailed the redo. Like, it looks fantastic, right? Like how they kind of brought it back to the original ideas, a little bit more room off the tee, a little bit more. Oh, I think they were saying before it kind of got one-dimensional, right? Really heavily tree-lined. Now, boy, there's some variety of how you can play it based on the conditions. I thought on TV it presented beautifully after what they did to it.
Yeah, completely. And I mostly remember, it was kind of Pine Valley-like in a way, without all the trees, and someone described it as kind of Pine Valley meets Augusta, and it certainly has that feel with like a little bit of a Australian, sort of addition. But all I remember really from college mainly was that our team was just trying to look over the fence at the Playboy Mansion, and all we could see was a bunch of peacocks in the back cage.
That you did not sneak into the grotto, unfortunately.
No, we did not get any sort of glimpse beyond the zoo.
Damn. Well, hey, never say never. Was going to ask you, too, big news on the LIV PGA Tour merger. As a player, thoughts on that? I didn't see this one coming, although eventually you could see it coming, but I didn't see it coming this fast, especially with Jay Monahan still at the helm and Greg Norman not being removed with all the back and forth, whatnot. Wow, lots of layers to untuck on this one. Put your journalism hat on this one. What do you sort of see on this scenario?
It's wild. I mean, what a wild week in golf. Really last week and a half, I guess. But yeah, I mean, you didn't see it. I don't think anybody could have possibly predicted it. And when you first read about it, you were just waiting for the little asterisk that this was originally taken from The Onion.
Yes,
it is just really it's just stunning, and I don't know what kind of outcome can really be in the future that that doesn't have PIF Saudi Arabia as just an incredibly large player in the game. Whether you want to say that they their stake is an ownership stake or not. The outcomes in the future, I mean, if this deal doesn't go through, yesterday it was announced the DOJ is now looking into the antitrust side of this. And if the deal falls apart, it doesn't go through for whatever reason, I mean, the executive team's cards in the PGA Tour are now on the table. And everyone's going to be looking to get paid, and PIF has a lot more money to put into golf. I mean, I just got to think that if it doesn't go through, we're going to see another sort of exodus from the PGA Tour. So, the scenarios that come out of this, I don't think, the PGA Tour is a standalone organization anymore without Saudi involvement, regardless of how it ends up going. What are your takes on it?
I don't know how Jay keeps his job. I don't know how you can sit on that platform, especially like bringing the 9/11 families in, and like you got to die on that hill at that point, right? Even if you thought it was best for the merger to happen, you might just have to. He's got enough money. I would have just removed myself and said, "There's got to be someone else who can do this deal." Mm-hmm. From a leadership standpoint, I don't understand how he stays. When you hung McIlroy and Tiger and Ricky and all those guys, Justin Thomas, they didn't take the cash. And you hung them out to dry, right, at the end of the day. So I don't know how this all pans out. I just can't imagine how Jay Monahan keeps his job for the next year. Right? Yeah. You've lost credibility at this point with the players, right? If you're supposed to be working for the players, I don't know how you don't have that conversation ahead of time. Why fight it, then make a deal? If they're willing to throw that much money in, and you're looking at the future of golf as a global brand, more money for the players, your coffers are full to go for the future. How do you not take that call on the front end, which he refused to do, and now all of a sudden you're backpedaling on everything you said? Mm-hmm. So I thought it was very short-sighted on the PGA Tour's part, and I turned out to be right in the sense that you got to at least listen to that conversation. Remember, at first he said, "I'm not even talking to you guys. We're the PGA Tour." And boy, I mean, I think they were going to have problems trying to keep sponsors, right? Because now, is my event elevated? Is it not elevated? If it's not elevated, what's it look like? Why am I paying the money for this? I think there was some parts of LIV that were pretty entertaining, and I think the major championships showed that these guys aren't washed up and they're done and it's a has-been tour. And they're going after a younger demographic that, went out to those events and they had a damn good time. That event in Australia was huge, right? And as a golf fan, even if Phil was playing bad, I still kind of want to see Phil out there, right? So I get the no-cut thing and some of those aspects of it. Not every event, but I can see why some people found the pace of it, the shotgun start, appealing. And I think they were, this merger was probably going to happen. But if I was Hideki Matsuyama, I wouldn't be real thrilled right now because I don't know how they didn't take the money on the front end. You could probably play in the majors. I can't imagine the majors were going to take you off. You're Hideki Matsuyama, really, is the U.S. Open or Open Championship not going to allow you in? And boy, 400 or 300 million, whatever they offered to Mark, boy, that's a lot of money on the dotted line to not take. And I would love to know what the philosophy was, why he didn't take it. And now all of a sudden, well, everything we're fighting against, now we've joined up. And how do you repay Hideki $300 million?
Right. Yeah.
How do you put that back in the bottle?
Right. Yeah, it's difficult to see how those pieces get put back together. I mean, if you read Michael Bamberger's last book, he mentions how in the early days when LIV was just kind of a whisper on the wind, he spoke to Greg Norman, and Norman was only talking about Hideki and getting into the Japanese market and how much that would mean to the tour, and that was the first player he was going after, which I thought was interesting. It doesn't seem like it's possible, obviously, that the ideas early on were aligned between Norman, between Yasser, between the PIF, and now when you look at the game that could have potentially been played as LIV as a Trojan horse for PIF to get into the PGA Tour, where they would have never been allowed before. That's a very interesting game of 3D chess that could have been played, and maybe somewhere along the lines the interests diverted. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think those underserved markets, I mean, I played one Australian Open and the crowd was unbelievable. The golf courses are so good, so much fun, and the crowd was really knowledgeable, and they were so starved. So that was good to see. And when you think about, okay, bring golf to the corners of the world that are underserved, that's a lovely idea. But this whole idea of how the PGA Tour is going to change, obviously, like Jimmy Dunn is a Notre Dame guy, has been mentioned kind of constantly among this whole process, and he's also one of the person who Bobby Axelrod was based on in the show Billions, and so you just think like how there has to be just some deep strategy underlying all of this on the PGA Tour's part. You hope there is, but really at the end of the day, on the surface, it just seems like there was just indications that the sponsors weren't going to be there for that long at that commitment level, and they, when he talks about coming to the table from a place of strength, it means that for maybe next year they were solid and their financial commitments were there, but were they the year after? So in the immediate moment they are, but what does that mean 2 years out or 5 years out? So yeah, there's more questions than answers at this point, but the players still feel betrayed and certainly mentioned that this week in their press conferences. It's to see where it goes is not, there's no real crystal ball with this one. There's just a lot of moving parts, but it would be interesting to see. I mean, the voice that's largely missing from this is the most important one from a player's standpoint. I mean, where is Tiger? Seemingly he'd be behind the scenes in all of these negotiations once this information came out, or talking to players, or have a major stake. But he's been largely mum in the public's standpoint.
Isn't that interesting that it's the radio silence might be deafening?
Yes. What do you make of that, Jason?
I don't know enough information on it. I mean, I can't imagine how he doesn't have, because I don't think any of the players, even Tiger, were involved in this negotiation. So I'd have to imagine if you're Tiger Woods and you stood up for the PGA Tour and you talked a bunch of guys out from going to live, and you're not even involved at that table with Mr. Dunn and that group, I don't know, man. You turned down $1 billion or $800 million.
Yeah.
I'd be questioning a few things from a leadership standpoint. I'll tell you that much.
Right. And
maybe they make them whole by giving them some equity in this new partnership, and they're going to have to. But I mean, there's from a media standpoint, from a branding standpoint, it does appear from the outside, at least, he was left hanging out to dry. They had him be the spokesperson along with Rory, and then all of a sudden, kaboom, we 180 you. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be real thrilled.
Right. Yes, Sally Jenkins wrote an interesting column yesterday in the Washington Post, which the underlying sentiment of it was spot on. I think it's unrealistic if you know kind of professional golfers' mentality. It was very unrealistic, but the idea was like players got cut out of all of this, and it was 4 guys in a room with cigar smoke, obstructing their clarity. And they decided the future of golf in these clandestine meetings, and the players were cut out. This is supposed to be a players' tour. I mean, Live is supposed to be player forward, right? I mean, that if you could say one thing about the players feel heard out there, according to a lot of their discussions, caddies did as well. Norman made sure of that. That was kind of his idea of going back to the 90s. But there are no players in this discussion. It's just like, don't worry, guys, we'll take care of you. Trust us, wink, wink. And Sally's column yesterday was how, regardless of how you feel about Saudi money in golf, that right there is enough for players to get together and say, we should have a voice in this. We shouldn't just trust the people who have kind of hung us out to dry to this point and have obviously not been entirely forthright. And we should get together and see what a player-run tour would actually look like, where we really would have a voice. And, was Phil right? Was Phil not right? Phil was right about some things. The way he went about it, I think you could argue, was he got involved with the wrong people with the right idea. But what we know now about Jay, what we know now about the executive team, discounting the ideas of players makes his original idea and his, grievances have more merit.
100%. I mean, I think, and you probably, without saying players' names, I've heard these same grievances off the record from friends of mine on tour before the Phil stuff. Mm-hmm. This is, you've been out there. This is common sort of sentiment at some level, don't you think?
For sure. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the idea of the pack, being something substantive is of the past. I don't know that anybody who's really in an advisory role as a player feels like they really have a voice. That's kind of all they feel like they are. They relay information and maybe, somewhat of an advisory role, but when it comes to sort of any substantive decision, their, actual positions are left by the wayside in favor of what is the most profitable. And that is certainly the theme of this, is money wins out. And these, few people who are in a room to decide the future of golf, we don't know what they carved out for themselves. Jay's
I'm sure it's pretty good.
Jay's position as CEO has just gotten significantly larger and more expanded. what does it mean for Jimmy Dunn and for the antitrust lawyer who was in those negotiations? What does their position on the board look like, and what does that come with? All of these things are really not just behind closed doors, but very opaque to even the people who really need to know and whose futures depend on it. So just taking everyone at their word now is, nobody can do that anymore.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds, that's for sure. But I still think there's some vindication from Phil Mickelson, right? I agree from a PR standpoint, probably wasn't the best way of going about it. But boy, he sure looks better today than he did a year and a half ago, or whenever the shit show was. He just does.
Mm-hmm.
So does Greg Norman at some level.
You can see he feels...
Greg finally got what he wanted.
Mm-hmm. Well, he did, assuming that LIV continues to exist.
Yes. Right.
To the earlier point I made about diverging visions, if the idea really is to fold LIV, which doesn't really make sense, regardless of whether it comes under the PGA Tour umbrella or not. But if that is kind of the compromise that was made, and to eliminate a competitor, as Jay said, I think Greg doesn't get out of this what he wants. For him, I don't think it really was about money. I think it was about being a major voice, having a huge role in golf, and certainly he's got a big ego and he wants it stroked, right? He wanted a seat at the table as well. And he wants to do right by players. I think it was very player forward from that perspective. So if he doesn't, LIV doesn't continue to survive, he may be one of, getting back to Jenkins' column from yesterday. I think there's two players, or one player and one former player, that could probably galvanize more players to create a new competitor out of this. It would be Tiger, and it would be Norman if he's left by the wayside in all of this.
But what happens if this happens? What happens if their LIV goes away, but the PGA Tour turns into more of a LIV around the world limited events as he envisioned 25 years ago? So what happens if, yes, LIV goes away, but does he still get vindicated if the PGA Tour has more of that LIV schedule, or PGA Tour Plus or Premium, whatever you want to call the top 70 guys, right? If it looks more LIV-like, is he still vindicated because there's events in Singapore and there's events in Australia and there's events in Europe? You know what I mean? It turns into that, which he always dreamed of taking, Jumbo Ozaki, the guys from all these major tours, and having one kind of world tour of the best of the best. That's kind of what it, they kind of gave him the World Golf Championships for that. But now does it fully come to fruition? Even if it's under the PGA Tour banner, does he still sort of get vindicated that he was right, that there will be this very limited, exclusive, for lack of a better word, premium PGA Tour, even if LIV dies, hypothetically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's certainly more validation to his ideas and to everything that he has put into LIV, and to all of the hopes in changing golf. But look at how forward-facing he is. Look, he's in front of the camera all the time, glad-handing, just being the face. He is, he's got a lot of bravado, and he's the kind of guy that I think wants to be there, right? Ultimately, if that happens, but they say, okay, thanks, Greg, time for you to go off into the sunset, I don't think that's going to be acceptable to him.
I agree with you there. He wants to be, he looked very happy being the face of LIV Golf and seeing the fans and being out there up front, right? He wasn't in the background by any sense of the imagination. And it's going to be fascinating to watch, just to see how this unfolds. So,
it really is.
It's going to be wild. But I want to talk to you about your golf game as well. Nice win earlier this year.
Oh,
you lit that field on fire, son. That was a good one. Southern Cal Open, would you win by 114 shots or something, right? What was it, 7 or 8? The field had, you pretty much went old school Tiger on them. So would you find a little bit on that week? Pretty strong field, nice win. Like, it's a little momentum builder there. Like, well done.
Yeah, no, it was incredible, and I won by 7 and beat third place by 10, and it was just one of those incredible golf experiences where everything is easy. I mean, the shots are going where you want them. When they don't, you follow it up with an exceptional shot, and you can do no wrong. And the putts are going in. Those experiences are very rare. So I cherish every moment, and I really felt like it has given me kind of new life, and to see what is possible at this stage of my career, that I actually am getting better, and that I think the future can still be very bright for me, despite, all of the young guns coming out of PGA Tour U and everything that a pro kind of, what most would consider at the tail end of their peak years, could still thrive. And I think that it showed me a lot of possibilities.
Did you feel that earlier in the week too? Like you were just on that week? Like was it just like a sense of calm and like not working on much? Like you just were ready to go when the bell started round 1? Like could you just sort of feel it was coming?
I played really well in the practice round, but I also played with a bunch of public golfers. One of them had a chipper, and I was giving him lessons on how not to stab the chipper into the ground, like a chopstick into a sirloin.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, I knew that I was playing well, but I didn't know what that translated to. I didn't know if that meant I was going to, because I hadn't played a tournament in quite a while. So I didn't know if that meant I was going to go shoot 3 under or 1 under or 8 under, but I knew there were going to be a lot of good shots available.
Well, maybe it was the chipper that inspired you. You just saw that, once you got the guy fixed, he's rolling it up. There was a good mental image in your head, positive vibes from the high handicap playing the old double-sided chipper, trying to get her up and down, right? Hey, whatever inspires you.
Well, yeah, to be fair, I think I built some credit up with the golf gods for those lessons.
Yes. Did we get the stabbing motion out of there by the end? Did we get him just to make a little putting stroke and kind of get the thing, up in the air and rolling like a putt?
It got shallower as the round went on,
okay.
But as it's not really what you do on the range or in practice, or when you have the watchful eyes of a coach. It's what happens the next day.
Yeah, well, let's hope this man is a little bit more efficient with the chipper, getting the ball up and down a little bit more. Well, it's a hell of a week. What's the plans in for the future of this year? Are you going to Q school? Like, what's it sort of looking like, from that standpoint?
Yeah, I will definitely go to Q school at the end of the year. I don't think there's any changes to Q school, but as far as I know, the price has been reduced from last year, and now there's 5 spots directly on the PGA Tour. So Q school is returning to glory, which is, there's some version of its glorious past, which is exciting. But leading up to that, it'll be kind of preparation. I'm very hopeful that I'll play in the CUDA this year, whether it be from a sponsor invite or I Monday qualify in again. That's kind of what my next real milestone. So I'm playing a few events leading up to that, and just hoping to peak around that time. And then my next challenge is to have my game in top form for Q school.
And this kind of goes back to this whole, merger. Have you heard anything of like how this all works now? Like, where's the Korn Ferry Tour going to line up versus the DP World Tour versus Liv having a stake in the Asian Tour? Like, how does this then funnel forward of, obviously your goal is to make, let's call it the PGA Tour, the highest level PGA Tour. Like, how is this funnel system now going to work inwards?
Yeah, that's an incredible question. And I talked to a player who's very high up on the points list on Korn Ferry Tour, and he was just like, I don't know what this means. What does this mean for me? He hopes that he's going to have full status on the PGA Tour next year. Obviously, there's still plenty of season to go on Korn Ferry, but he's in prime position. So that's the big question. What does this mean for the developmental ranks? What does this mean for the development system? If you look at, for all of the live advocates out there and the so-called live bots, right, criticizing the PGA Tour left and right. There's no real development system for live. I mean, they released a plan for Q School that was basically like, if you're in the top, 150 in the world, okay, give it a shot. You can have a chance. But that's not realistic for anybody who's trying to make it in the game. So it was a closed shop, and the PGA Tour, for all you can critique it for, there's still a strong pathway with exceptional play to become a player who can get into the top events. It's still a meritocracy. So what does all this mean for the rising players? And what does this mean for Korn Ferry Tour? And if money wins out in the end, and if the PIF creates some sort of system that maybe looks a lot more live than it does Korn Ferry Tour or non-elevated events, and they try to squeeze money out of it to recoup investment, it could be dire for the lower ranks. And I think that could be true of team golf as well. I mean, they're not inviting, a team qualifiers out on the live, which would be an exceptional format. I mean, if you had a Monday qualifier every week for the team, you could show up with your team and qualify and get into a life-changing event. That would be must-watch entertainment.
100%. That would be so much. Yeah. If you guys all get in, now you get a spot or two spots available each week. That'd
right.
be wild.
That would be. So again, it's what is the direction? There's very little indication at the top. So there's the pieces that fall into place last are always at the, more towards the bottom, and more often than not, they kind of have to pick up the crumbs that are left. So I fear for that, and for the players, who are waiting for their break kind of in the mid-levels of the Korn Ferry Tour, let alone the Canadian, Latin America, which now will become one tour.
That's one, right? And then my question, I mean, to me too, on the PGA Tour, there could almost be two PGA Tours, right? The guys playing, the John Deere Classic, and then the guys playing in these elevated events, right? Then does Korn Ferry Tour, if they want to keep the DP World Tour open, does Korn Ferry feed DP? Then you go to the DP World Tour to get to the first level of PGA Tour? Then you have to work your way up from the PGA Tour to the top 70? I mean, is that how it's going to go? Because
Right.
how do you have the Korn Ferry Tour and the DP World Tour at the same time? Unless there's a big enough market in Europe for sponsors to have that. But then what's the number 2 tour? Is it Korn Ferry or is it DP? And how does that all work out? That's the part to me. It's, and then if you take, Latin America combining with Canada, now you almost have 5 layers.
How do they categorize all of those? Where do they fall?
Exactly.
Is it possible that DP expands to engulf Korn Ferry, and then it becomes kind of a transatlantic tour that feeds the PGA Tour, and then the top players feed the team aspect of it, something like that? I mean, that's very probable.
Which could be better, right? Because then if you combine Korn Ferry and DP World Tour, there would at least be more money for the players. As you well know, you can finish 50th on the money list on the Korn Ferry Tour, and it's a tough living. That's a tough one. Yeah. So is that a good thing then, where maybe they do start to make it where, because the money's better on the DP World Tour, if they did some sort of a combination, then it's a viable place to actually make a good living playing professional golf versus, I'll explain this one to you. Like it's hard out on the Korn Ferry Tour to, unless you're just there for 1 or 2 years and make it to the PGA Tour. That's tough. So do they try to make that a more realistic place for guys to play? Then that feeds up to the PGA Tour. I don't know. I could see something like that happening, where they just get combined with a lot more opportunities for those players.
Yeah.
World ranking points. Then you're not having 2 tours competing at that sort of level. Because I don't know going forward what's the better tour, Korn Ferry or DP World, with the way it's going. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't have a strong argument. I guess maybe DP World Tour now, but how long does that last for? So I don't know. It's going to be hopefully in the end for guys like you, it's better, meaning there's more money in the game. So even if you are playing not on the PGA Tour, if they combine those, you can still make a realistic, really nice living as a professional golfer versus holding on for dear life, trying to get to that next level. For the guy, I have this lens because I'm friends with the players, right? So I'd rather see you be able to go out there and do really well and not have to think about, can I do this again if I'm 60th on the money list, which is a strong year, and you're fully exempt the next year on the Korn Ferry Tour. But if you add it all up, it's like, wow, I'm hardly making anything. I don't know how fair that seems, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. And
so I'd like to see that change.
Yeah, totally agree. Anything. I mean, that's the optimistic perspective and outlook is that the money in the developmental ranks improves. I mean, and it has. And without all of this, the Korn Ferry Tour purses finally were bumped this year.
Right.
Which was long overdue, and it had absolutely nothing to do with Liv's existence. But at least those purses went from 700, 750 to $1 million. The formerly finals events are 1.5 this year. So guys can make a living. I mean, if you finish 50th, you can finally turn a profit, decent profit. I mean, you're not going to get
rich. Where 5 years ago you couldn't.
But when even 3 years ago, you really couldn't. And so those are positive steps. But yeah, I mean, who knows what happens? That's going to be an afterthought.
I always find it interesting as well from the players. Like, when did you know you were good enough to go play professional golf as a touring pro? Not a club pro, but a touring pro. Like, was there a couple moments or a moment that hit you where it's like, yeah, I'm going to give this a shot and I'm good enough to do this?
And I really didn't know, Jason. I shot some really low scores in college, shot the lowest score in Notre Dame history, and I was just improving. I mean, I came in my freshman year at Notre Dame, played well, but not highly ranked well. And then I changed my entire technique around. I used to have a very strong grip growing up. It was just like a homemade Paul Azinger grip. And I made a mistake and hit a snap hook that cost my team our conference title. And we decided to make a drastic change. And I weakened my grip. And to make the change faster, I over-exaggerated it and went from the Paul Azinger grip to as weak a grip as, you can basically set your left hand on the club and, almost see an open palm. So I couldn't keep it on the planet my sophomore year and even the beginning of my junior year. And then all of a sudden something clicked and I just got gradually better until I was like one of the top 50 players in the country my senior year. And I thought, well, this will be fun. This is worth giving a shot. But I remember sitting in a sponsor meeting and was asking for some seed money to get going. And I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to make it next year or I'm going to make it in 5 years. I may still be at this when I'm 30, but I had played with a vet in State Open who had continued playing late into his 30s, played all around the world. And he was just so jaded and just had a very pessimistic outlook on everything. And I said, I don't want to end up there. But I had no idea then how long it would take. And I had no intention to become the journeyman that I've become.
Is your grip still that weak?
No, it's I would say just slightly stronger than neutral now.
Okay, you figured it out, then went back to the other. Okay, I was saying you probably changed it at some point. You played all over the world, right? You've all these tours, from PGA Tour to European or to Asia, right, over Japanese Tour, all the stuff. What Korn Ferry Tour, all of it. What's the biggest difference you see when you play like a PGA Tour event versus Korn Ferry Tour event or an event over in Asia? Like, is it closer than people think, or is the gap pretty wide from a talent standpoint, or is it just a smidgen?
I think the depth is something that's different. So, like, if you go play in Asia, really any event that's around Asia, the top players are exceptional, and the closer you get to the cut, the less depth there is, and certainly at the bottom, you get players who are representing their countries and that happens over here too, but they get, some sort of national exemption into an event, and they don't even really have a prayer of breaking 80. And I think the closer you get to the top, the fewer consecutive mistakes you see out of players. And like on the PGA Tour, on any given week, anybody has a chance to win, and it feels like that's the case on Korn Ferry now too. Just really most players that win can come out of nowhere. They can be, 120th on the points list, and then all of a sudden they have their week and they win. And I just think the depth has grown so tremendously. But there's just fewer mistakes the closer you get to the top. And I think players understand their own personal games. They just have a higher golf IQ as it pertains to their own games. And you don't see two consecutive mistakes the closer you get to the top.
So the talent's kind of the same. It's just they don't compound anything. They just know how to get that ball in the hole, and it's just more efficient, essentially.
That's part of it. I don't know if it's talent. I mean, just the work ethic at the top, and is getting back to our conversation earlier about the future of golf and the news and everything. There's so much. The grind at the top is, I think, significant, and the idea that players would get together now and say, we weren't involved in these negotiations. We're demanding that we're going to create our own tour. We're going to go get sponsors, and we're going to do it our way, and we want to make the decisions. And I just think what is required to be a top professional golfer now is so all-encompassing. It is such a minutia-based, data-driven endeavor, as well as, exceptional talent and then an unbelievably methodical amount of practice, that most players just don't have the energy to go do something like that, let alone the interest. The work ethic on the Korn Ferry Tour is unbelievable. I mean, guys you'll just see them there morning to night. And I mean, and people have figured out too, this has been a big difference. The longer I've played, I've noticed the importance of recovery and rest. And so you see a lot of work early in the week. The closer you get to a tournament, the more more players are gathering their energy and just resting. But it's just such an all-encompassing endeavor. And so I just think there really isn't much room for much else if you're going to be a top player right now.
Yeah, the commitment, I always say, like the behind the stuff you don't see is staggering, from the players that got me friendly with, of how much work it takes, right? I mean, how much work it takes from even when you're off, you're working, and the commitment of it. It's crazy, right? And the traveling, and it wears on you. It's hard on family stuff. Like there's some sacrifices, the PGA Tour guys, they make. They're well paid, they're well compensated, but it's a tough life too. No, it's interesting just to kind of see, what does it make? What happens to make somebody tick at that level, to put that level of commitment. Especially the guys who play for take like a Brian Gay, who's been out there for 25 years. That's incredible, right? Of how good he was for that long. And he's got it's not like a household name for everybody, but I love players like that, where it's like, can you imagine the commitment at 45 years old, not being the longest guy in the world, and he's still out there winning and competing? Like, what that takes behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. It's, that's your whole life.
It's your whole life.
To be great for that long.
It's from when you wake up in the morning, all the decisions you make, right out of bed, what you're putting in your body, what you're spending your energy on, who you're working out in the gym with. I mean, you mentioned Brian Gay, but think about journeymen like Scott Gachesky, right? I mean, guys who have put in the work for so long and I mean, Scott is a wonderful player and kind of amazing that he continues to improve. But there is not a ton of validation through the years, right? there's just a lot more losses than wins. And for the amount of sweat equity that you are putting in, if you put that into most other professions, you'd make more money. You'd get further. Yeah. If you're at the top of your profession, you're one of the top, let's say, 500 or 600 in your profession, you would do better than you do playing professional golf. The money in kind of the mid hundreds falls off precipitously for the amount of sweat equity that you have to put in. So,
but yet it's still there. Scott won this year again, right? So it's like he can still do it, right? You can know he still is that good.
Of course, right. And I mean, that's what you hang on to, is that you can continue to improve, that you can wake up every day and get better, and you still have a chance to achieve something monumental that you've dreamed about forever.
Yep. And he's winning in his 40s against kids half his age. It's pretty impressive.
Exactly.
I was going to ask you, too, when he played in the AT&T, you got to play with Peter Jacobson. Fluff was on the bag. Monday Q Ryan, gosh, what a great guy, man. Like, he's helped us so much. Like, Ryan French is awesome. For you, if people listening don't know Ryan French, he's Monday Q Info on Twitter. Follow it. It's a great follow. All these insights, stories, interesting stuff. If you love golf, it's a great story. And I know you're tight with Ryan as well. But what a group. Like, you got Huey Lewis following you around. You got Steve Young. You're playing with Jake. You're out at Monterey Peninsula. And you're playing well. Like, that's got to be a hell of a week. And what was it like to play with Jake and watch him and Fluff still do the thing, and Fluff still out there, caddying away at God knows, how many years? Like, that just had to be such a fun week.
Oh, it was magic. It was one of the greatest weeks of my life. And to have those people around, just so much wisdom, not just obviously with Jake, and who made the week all about me. It was his final go-around at Pebble Beach, his final go-around in a competitive tournament. And he did everything he could to cheer me on, rather than make it kind of a celebration of him and his career, which, in what it really should have been, what I would have expected it to be. It just spoke to what an incredible human being Jake is. And Fluff was the king of one-liners. He didn't speak much, but when he did, you listened, and it was powerful. And then to have Steve Young and, talk about backing up Montana and the grind, and he's so analytical. And it's amazing how his ideas outside of golf translated to what he was doing on the golf course. So every single shot he would need to fully analyze, and he'd need to bring Jake in, he'd need to bring me in, he'd need to ask questions about why something worked, why something didn't work. What if I tried, this next time? All of these very subtle, important questions, or they were important to him. It was way too much information, significantly more information than you would ever want, certainly at a golf tournament. But you can see why he became so successful. He's such a student of sport, and he spent all that time absorbing every single piece of information he could from Montana. And that just, when he finally broke out, he had all of that internalized and ready, and didn't, it's kind of late for him to be like an exceptional golfer, but he is determined to get better. And that's like the beauty of the game. And he represented that. And Huey Lewis there, it was so funny because Ben Rector, who filled in for Huey Lewis, Ben's like a Billboard topping musician. And Ben had started his career in a Huey Lewis cover band.
Really?
And he was so nervous to talk to Huey. And after the morning of the third round, Ben and I were walking. We were talking about his new songs that he had released, and I asked him whether he had talked to Huey about music, and he was like, "Man, I can't be the one to start that conversation. He's got to bring it up. He's one of my heroes. I'm like so nervous to talk to him about music." And he was just so genuine. and geeking out and starstruck, which was so cool. I mean, it would have been like, me playing with Tiger or something,
Yeah.
just an incredible guy, so smart, a really good golfer, and just like he is a musical genius. But we had this moment on the back of the 14th tee at Spyglass where Steve and we were all back there, and these residents of one of the houses on the back of the tee came out with guitars for Jake and for Ben. And Steve and Ben had a closest to the pin contest on the previous hole, and Ben had won. And first he and Jake played this little bluesy riff that was kind of cool, but then Steve asked for a serenade from Ben, and Ben improvised this when there was probably 10 or 12 people around. The sun was coming through the trees, and it was idyllic, and there was dogs running around, and he just played this beautiful little step down romantic melody, and he just made this hilariously funny lyrics that had Steve in stitches, and it was, you couldn't believe you were in a PGA Tour event. It was the coolest, most relaxed moment on a golf course in a high stress, what should have been a high stress situation I've ever been a part of. And it was surreal. It was an amazing, magical experience.
I've been fortunate enough to be friends with Kenton Bryant, who's out of Nashville, and gone on golf trips. And there is a different level when they grab an acoustic guitar and sit around and play versus somebody who's just really good at guitar and can kind of sing. Right? Isn't it amazing how it's like watching a pro golfer hit a golf ball? When you're at that level, they just make it look effortless, don't they? You just give them an acoustic guitar and say, "Go do it," and it's just kaboom. There's a massive talent difference of how truly good a professional recording touring artist is. And you're like, okay, that's why this gentleman makes albums. That's why he tours. That's why they do what they do. It's that good. It's so much fun to watch that up close, isn't it?
Oh, unbelievable. It's, to your point, it's the difference between a scratch player and a professional golfer. It's a huge difference, monumental difference.
Yes.
But I suspect that if you had, Ben's his first instrument is piano, I suspect if you had given him any instrument, give him a tuba, he would have made it work. He's that level of musical genius. And I was thinking about this. Yesterday. I have a friend who he is a very, very prominent music supervisor in Hollywood, and he went to watch the U.S. Open yesterday. And he played Division I college golf, and he hasn't been to watch professional golf in a long time. And he was just geeking out. He followed Rory the whole time, and he's like, man, this is like, it's like watching the greatest guitar player in the world. It's like watching, Clapton in his prime, or Hendrix, or Tim Reynolds. It's just transcendent. And I thought, man, it would be really cool with all this discussion about whether music belongs on the golf course to get your perfect U.S. Open playlist. I need to hear this when you're done.
It is. It's fun to watch anybody who does something at an elite level. Right, I mean, really elite. I could watch somebody shoot skeet with a shotgun and just go, my God, how do you, do that quick, right? Like anything that somebody does elite, or they're one of the best in the world at it, it's, if you can't learn something from watching that, there's something wrong with you, of watching anybody who does something that's special like that. It's fun to do it.
Right.
A couple more here I was going to ask you, on the media side of stuff, is there like a story, let's say, that from the writing that you've done that has kind of been the most important to you, or most interesting, or anything like that from, I know you're doing both sides of the coin. You're playing professional golf, and you're also doing some stuff with media. Is there one that kind of just stands out that's just like, wow, that was cool to cover, or I didn't see that angle coming, or, something that we should kind of look at of the work that you've done?
The nice thing, getting back to you mentioning Ryan French earlier, is he just says, whatever you want to write. Whenever you feel inspired, or your story is really touching to you, write it. So anything that I've written has been something that's been important to me, and I don't have to, write columns or write about anything that I'm not really invested in. And it helps me a lot. These profile pieces that I've done really in the last week, I did Austin Truslow and Jesse Schutte, but part of what I love about writing is it allows me to exercise kind of my curiosity and golf fandom. And I get to ask a ton of questions about process. I think that is something that's gotten lost in, kind of the later in my career, is like I just haven't been able to ask enough questions of other players about how they're doing something. There's just, there's not really enough time unless it's somebody that you're really close with. So I get to satisfy that curiosity, which is great for both a writing perspective and also a playing perspective. I mean, certainly telling Willie Wilcox's story was really important to me. I mean, it was really important to Willie. I think at the time it really helped him a lot, and I hope he still considers it a cathartic experience for him. That was an important story, I think, to tell, and he seems to be doing really well. And I talked to him yesterday morning, and he's at the U.S. Open now, caddying for Ben Carr,
Yeah.
and other players are interested in having him caddy for him. And meanwhile, he's hitting exceptional shots and playing well. So I hope he's continued to make progress. I think he has. So that was important, and I have some other stories in the works right now that I'm really enjoying writing. I don't know when I'll release them. I want to get them right, but we've got some exciting work ahead at Monday Q Info, and Ryan is just such an exceptional human being, and he's so selfless. That's the amazing thing is being a part of his ride and his journey, is he gets so many opportunities to help, or I should say, he's got so many people offering to help, willing to help, and all that help gets passed on to players. All that help gets passed on to other people in need. He never takes anything for himself, and that is, it goes against kind of every instinct that most of us have, because at some point, you need to do right by yourself for all the work you're putting in, and he just does everything he can to be as helpful and selfless as possible. And I'm just very fortunate to have a great friend and partner in him, to kind of help me, to mentor me, and to be a part of that journey.
He's a good man. He really is. I consider myself lucky that consider him a friend. He's a really, really good human being. They don't make any better than Ryan. Agree with you. And Willie. I've gotten to be close to Willie too, and he is doing well, I think. And he is a good soul, right? Willie's a good soul. I'm glad he's doing well. I'm sure it's a journey that you and I can't imagine what he's been on and what that takes to keep life moving in the right direction. But it seems like he's doing pretty good. So I'm proud of him. He's a good man as well. Last one I got, I always ask, I'm a golf course architect geek, so I always have to ask you, you've played all over the world. Give me your 2 or 3 best golf courses and what makes the architecture of those golf courses, fantastic or in your list.
Man, I love Donald Ross golf courses. There's so many of them all over New England in the Northeast. I grew up in New Hampshire, a lot in Massachusetts. Boston Golf Club is a spectacular course. I don't think that's a Ross, but what are my top courses? I guess I just haven't really thought about that in a while. I
you just wake up every day and play it, right? Like just enjoyable of an experience.
I love Southern Highlands in Las Vegas. It's that's a Robert Trent Jones Jr. and Senior course. I think that place is so much fun to play, and waking up there's so much variety. It can be really difficult. It can be really scoreable. There's a ton of diversity in the greens, and there's some little slender areas that are impossible to get to, and there's some big fat areas that just funnel the ball to the hole. They play the collegiate masters there. It's an exceptionally fun golf course. So that's up there. I mean, Shadow Creek, another one in Vegas that I absolutely love. You know, Spyglass is really hard, really fun, has kind of all of those early ocean holes that are picturesque, and then the holes through the back nine that wind through the trees that can punch you in the mouth. I've been fortunate enough to play Pine Valley a few times. Unfortunately, the summer that I played it, it had been a difficult summer, so we didn't get it in top shape, but it was, it was an architectural marvel. And yeah, I mean, I think I'd put all of those right at the top.
Yeah, I've never played Pine Valley. I've heard architecturally it's just amazing. Like there's a reason it's 1, 2, or 3 in the world rankings. Everyone who has it, right? Like it should be there. It's that good.
Yeah. The bunkering is really unique and just perfectly positioned. Frames a lot of holes, and then you also have the tree lines, and it feels can feel like a video game. Yeah, I mean those places, and then I'll plug my home course here, which is a Trent Jones Jr. course, La Sendas Golf Club in Phoenix. And the more I play that, the more, I mean, there's so much character, and it's really difficult, and it's just a lot of fun to play day in, day out.
Well, Pro, thank you for your time today. This has been a fascinating conversation. I've really, truly enjoyed it. Congrats again on the win and, that momentum that builds. So going to be, watching you going forward. And like I said, there's so much interesting things going on in golf right now. It's very cool to have your perspective. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me, Jason. Very, very kind of you, and a lot of fun to speak. Keep rolling with everything you guys are doing at Sub 70. The equipment is beautiful, and the culture that you guys are building there from the outside looking in, just the accessibility, it's all really encouraging. So I'm a Callaway guy at the moment, but I'm cheering you on.
Well, I appreciate it. It means a lot coming from you, Pro. It really does. Thank you so much.